Have you ever looked at like a bizarre new wellness trend? You know, the ones where people are paying thousands of dollars just to sit in some like hyperbaric chamber?
Oh, right, the ones infused with, crystalline sound waves or whatever.
Exactly. And you just sit there and wonder, how are millions of people actually falling for this?
Yeah, it's wild.
Or, you see a sudden rabid craze over some virtually useless piece of technology,
Mm.
or like a financial asset that has absolutely zero underlying value, right?
Right.
And the followers, they just treat it like a literal religion.
They absolutely do.
From the outside, you look at the sheer devotion, you look at claims that, I mean, they completely defy basic physics or economics, and you just wait for logic to kick in.
Right, you think it has to.
But it doesn't. It never does.
No, it doesn't. It is a really fascinating and, honestly, kind of terrifying psychological phenomenon because from that outside perspective, it really does feel like a collective hallucination.
Yeah.
You assume that eventually, the human brain's rational faculty is just going to override all that emotional fervor.
Right, like the followers will look around, realize the hyperbaric chamber is just, I don't know, a fancy tent with a Bluetooth speaker in it, and just go home.
Exactly. But the reality of human nature, which history proves time and time again, is that under a very specific set of conditions, that rational faculty just never comes back online.
Wow.
Yeah, logic is just permanently locked out of the building.
And today we are going to look at the exact blueprint of how those conditions are created. Welcome to our deep dive, by the way.
Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here joining us. We are diving into a text today that explores Law 27 from the 48 Laws of Power.
Such an interesting chapter.
It really is. This specific law, it lays out the mechanical historical architecture of playing on people's desperate need to believe just to construct a cult-like following.
Right, the actual mechanics of it.
Exactly. Now, the mission of this deep dive today, for you listening, is not to hand you a manual for starting your own cult.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, please don't. The goal is to decode this universal playbook of mass deception. Because once you understand the underlying psychology,
The five-step mechanism, essentially.
right, the 5 steps that charlatans have used for centuries, once you see it, it acts like a pair of psychological X-ray glasses.
That's a great way to put it.
You'll start seeing these exact manipulative patterns everywhere. I mean, in the marketing of tech startups, in fringe political movements, modern business culture, those crazy wellness trends.
Yeah, and that is the ultimate value of dissecting this material, right?
Mm.
Because knowledge is most valuable when it's, understood and applied defensively.
Definitely.
We live in an era of unprecedented information overload, which, ironically, actually makes us more susceptible to these tactics, not less.
Wait, really?
What?
More susceptible.
Absolutely, because we're overwhelmed. So understanding how the architects of deception operate, how they essentially bypass your critical thinking, it's quite literally your best cognitive armor against them.
I love that. Cognitive armor.
Yeah.
So to understand how the trap is sprung, I guess we have to look at the prey first, right?
We do. We have to look at ourselves.
Yeah, we need to explore the human vulnerability that makes any of this possible in the first place. Like, why do we actually want to be deceived?
Right.
The text makes this foundational claim that humans simply cannot endure long periods of doubt or emptiness. We have this overwhelming, almost biological need to believe in something.
Yes.
If we don't have a solid belief system, we experience like a kind of psychological vertigo.
Psychological vertigo, exactly.
Yeah.
And the source grounds this need in a very specific historical context, which I think is crucial for understanding why these movements spike at certain times in history.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the text draws heavily on the work of the historian Corre de Francesco.
Mm-hmm.
And she pointed out that charlatanism absolutely thrives during periods of immense cultural and economic transformation.
Oh, interesting. Like when things are unstable.
Precisely. If you look at the Renaissance, for example, and the centuries immediately following it, you see this perfect storm.
Right.
You had organized religion, which had provided, absolute certainty for centuries, but its supreme authority was slowly waning.
Right. People were starting to question the church.
Exactly. And simultaneously, you have the scientific method rising. Scientists are discovering physical laws that completely disrupt how humanity views its place in the universe.
Let me pause you there, though, because that feels a bit counterintuitive to me.
How so?
Well, if science is rising, right, if we are discovering empirical truth and moving away from superstition, shouldn't that make people, like, less susceptible to charlatans?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. Why does the rise of empirical science create a breeding ground for mass deception?
It's a great question. Because empirical science doesn't offer emotional comfort.
Hmm.
It offers cold, hard, and often very complex facts. Before this shift, the secure foundations of life were deeply set.
Right, you just knew the rules.
Exactly. You knew your exact place in the social hierarchy, you knew the religious rules that govern the cosmos, and you had an absolute guarantee of what happened after you died.
It was restrictive, sure, but it was safe.
Incredibly safe, psychologically. So when those old values and spiritual certainties could no longer be relied upon as absolute fact, it created a massive historical vacuum.
Because science comes in and says, we don't know everything yet, but we're testing hypotheses.
Right. And for the average human psyche, hearing, "we don't know everything yet," is absolutely terrifying.
I can imagine.
When you create that kind of vacuum, people panic. They feel completely adrift, so they become desperate to rally around a new cause, a new charismatic leader, or just a new faith to fill that void and stop the vertigo.
Wow, so they just need an anchor, basically, even if that anchor is made of styrofoam.
Precisely. The text notes that during these transitional periods, the number of dupes just multiplies exponentially.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, in the 17th century, there was this English writer who actually coined a really chilling phrase for these people. He called them self-killers.
Self-killers, wow. That implies like a level of active participation in their own destruction, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's not just a predator out hunting helpless prey. The prey is actively seeking out the predator just to alleviate their own psychological discomfort.
Exactly. They want the illusion.
And speaking of the prey, the text brings up a point about who the ideal target for a charlatan actually is. And honestly, it completely subverted my expectations.
Oh, the part about the uneducated.
Yes. You would naturally assume that the most uneducated, illiterate people in a society would be the easiest to fool. But the source argues the exact opposite.
It does.
It claims the illiterate are actually protected by their, quote, healthy common sense.
It is such a brilliant observation. Think about the completely uneducated peasant of the 16th century, right? Or even just a completely unengaged citizen today. They rely on grounded, lived experience.
Right.
If someone comes into their village claiming they have a machine that turns lead into gold, the uneducated person relies on the undeniable reality of their daily labor.
Yeah, their common sense dictates that wealth requires backbreaking work in the fields.
Exactly. They look at the magic machine, decide it sounds like total nonsense, and they just go back to plowing. They are too grounded in the physical struggle of reality to be swept away by abstract promises.
Wait, okay, I have to challenge that premise just a little bit.
Go for it.
Are you saying education, or at least a certain type of it, actually makes us more vulnerable to cults and deception?
In a way, yeah.
Because if I look at modern examples, financial cults, extreme diet fads, multi-level marketing schemes that are disguised as tech incubators, we see highly educated people falling for them. Doctors, engineers, lawyers.
All the time.
How does the text account for that?
It accounts for it by focusing on the danger of incomplete knowledge.
Incomplete knowledge.
Right.
Right.
The test argues that the charlatan's absolute choicest audience is the semi-literate, or the half-educated.
Ah, I see.
These are people who have encountered science, literature, or advanced concepts, but they haven't fully mastered the rigorous critical thinking required to actually evaluate them.
So they know a little bit, but not enough.
Exactly. They have exchanged that grounded, healthy common sense for a little bit of distorted abstract information.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of that. It's almost like a computer firewall, right?
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like the totally uneducated person has a default block on everything they don't understand. Any incoming data package that isn't instantly recognizable as daily survival just gets completely rejected.
Right, access denied.
But the half-educated person has manually opened up a few ports in their firewall for, like, science, progress, and innovation.
Yes.
So the charlatan just disguises their malicious code as authorized scientific traffic, and it slips right through.
That is an excellent analogy. The half-educated person knows just enough to be intrigued, but not enough to be skeptical of the actual methodology.
Right.
They know that chemistry is a real field that produces seemingly magical results. They know that new technologies are constantly disrupting old paradigms.
So they're primed for it.
Completely primed.
Yeah.
So when a charismatic figure produces a complicated-looking apparatus and uses really heavy jargon, words that sound vaguely scientific but are actually totally meaningless.
The half-educated person's ego kicks in.
Exactly. Their ego kicks in. They think, well, I recognize some of these words. I'm a modern, forward-thinking person.
I'm smart.
I'm smart.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand the underlying math, but it sounds like the frontier, the science. The Dunning-Kruger effect is essentially weaponized against them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Their slight knowledge gives them an illusion of competence, making them the perfect, compliant victim.
They're too proud to admit they don't understand the jargon, so they just nod along and hand over their money.
Precisely.
To illustrate just how fatal this specific type of gullibility can be, the text references this dark satirical fable by James Thurber called The Owl Who Was God.
Such a great story.
The setup is so simple but incredibly revealing. So one pitch black, starless midnight, two ground moles are slipping through the forest, and an owl sitting in a tree spots them and says, "You too." The moles are absolutely terrified and astonished because, in their experience, no one can see in such thick darkness.
And their lived experience says it's impossible.
Right. So they run back and tell all the other animals that the owl must be the greatest, wisest creature in the world because he possesses this seemingly supernatural power.
Notice the dynamic there, though. The owl hasn't claimed to be a god.
Right.
He simply utilized a natural biological trait, his night vision. It is the followers, the moles, who interpret this mundane trait as a sign of divine power because it operates outside their limited frame of reference.
Exactly. The followers initiate the myth. It's wild. So a secretary bird decides to go test this new god.
The scientific method approaches.
Yes. He finds the owl in the dark and asks, "How many claws am I holding up?" The owl says 2, which just happens to be correct.
A lucky guess, essentially.
Yeah. Then the bird asks for another expression for that is to say, and the owl replies, "To wit."
Just making owl noises.
Right. Finally, the bird asks why a lover calls on his love, and the owl says, "To woo."
To wit, to woo. The owl is literally just making basic owl sounds. He isn't answering the questions at all. He is just existing.
Exactly. But the secretary bird projects profound meaning onto those random sounds. He goes back to the forest and reports that the owl is a supreme genius who can answer the most complex questions.
And this is where the trouble really starts.
Oh, yeah. Because now, at this point, a red fox and a few other naturally skeptical animals ask a totally rational, common-sense question. They say, sure, he can see in the dark, but can he see in the daytime, too?
The introduction of the critical faculty. And how does the group respond to that?
The mob of animals just laughs at them. They mock the skeptics for asking such a silly question, and they physically drive the fox and his friends out of the region.
Incredible.
Yeah. They expel the skeptics, and then they officially make the owl their leader.
This is such a crucial step in the psychology of the cult. The presence of a skeptic actually threatens the emotional comfort of the newly formed belief system.
Right, because it introduces doubt.
Exactly. The half-educated mom doesn't debate the fox. They don't test his hypothesis by actually taking the owl into the sunlight. They simply exile the source of doubt to protect their fragile new reality.
And it leads to their absolute destruction.
Yes, it does.
The animals decide to bring their new god out at high noon to lead them. The sun is, of course, completely blinding the owl, so he's walking very slowly, stumbling around, peering blindly with these huge staring eyes.
But they don't see that.
No, the animals don't see a blind bird. They interpret his stumbling as, like, great dignity and deep contemplation.
Well,
Suddenly, the blinded owl starts walking straight down the middle of a paved concrete highway. The animals dutifully fall in line right behind him.
oh no.
A hawk scouts ahead and flies back in an absolute panic, reporting that a massive truck is hurtling toward them at 50 miles an hour.
The reality check.
The secretary bird tells the owl there is mortal danger approaching, and the owl, who obviously cannot see the truck or comprehend the warning, just calmly says, "Who?"
His default biological response is once again interpreted as divine stoicism.
Yes. The animals cry out, "He's God! He fears nothing!" And they are literally still chanting, "He's God," right as the truck plows into the flock and runs them all down.
It's so dark, but so perfect.
Thurber's moral at the end of the fable is this twist on the famous Lincoln quote. He says, "You can fool too many of the people too much of the time."
It is a devastatingly accurate psychological portrait. The fable brilliantly highlights how an initial mild misunderstanding gets blown into absolute divinity by a crowd that is just desperate for a leader. The owl didn't ask to be a god. He didn't formulate a grand plan. The mob created him out of their own psychological void. They projected their desire for a savior onto his completely mundane, vague actions.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable realization for us humans. If people will do that entirely on their own, right? If they will project divinity onto a confused bird just to alleviate their own existential dread, imagine what happens when a highly intelligent, charismatic human being intentionally decides to exploit that vulnerability.
That's where it gets truly dangerous.
Because we have this innate psychological void, and because we are just educated enough to be fooled by jargon, we are highly susceptible to anyone who knows exactly what bait to use.
We were sitting ducks.
Yeah, sitting ducks. And that brings us to the core of the source material, the charlatan-specific 5-step playbook for engineering this devotion. How do they intentionally set the trap?
Well, the mechanics of the trap are designed to exploit the exact vulnerabilities we just discussed. Step 1 of this historical playbook is really fundamental.
Okay, what is it?
Keep it vague, keep it simple.
The text is adamant about this. To attract a massive following, you do not use clear, readable actions or highly specific claims. You use hazy, deceptive words.
Hazy and deceptive, yes.
Your promises have to be absolute and transformative. You promise total financial freedom, perfect health, spiritual enlightenment. But the details of how that transformation will actually occur, those must remain completely vague.
The combination of those two elements is the actual genius of the trap. The grand promise stimulates the raw emotional desire of the target, while the vagueness paralyzes their intellect.
Interesting.
Think about it. If you promise someone that they will make a 5% return on their investment over 10 years through a diversified portfolio of index funds, that is clear, specific, and incredibly boring.
Yeah, no one's rioting in the streets for index funds.
Exactly. It engages the rational brain. But if you promise them that they will unlock exponential multidimensional wealth by aligning their capital with decentralized quantum synergies,
Oh, boy.
well, the emotional brain hears wealth, and the rational brain gets tangled up trying to decode quantum synergies.
It makes me think immediately of the endless parade of tech startups and crypto white papers we see today.
Oh, spot on.
You read their mission statements, and they are claiming they are going to, quote, revolutionize the paradigm of algorithmic infrastructure or democratize decentralized synergy.
Buzzword soup.
Totally. They
Yeah.
invent new multisyllabic words for
Yeah.
totally vague concepts. It creates this instant veneer of profundity.
Right.
But if you actually sit the founder down and say, wait, break this down for me. What physical product or specific service does your company actually sell to generate revenue?
Happened.
They get highly defensive, and they usually can't give you a straight one-sentence answer.
And according to the text, that inability to give a straight answer isn't a flaw in their marketing, it is a strategic necessity.
Wait, really? A necessity?
Yes, talk too vaguely without the grand promise and you just sound confused and you lose all credibility.
Oh.
But it is far, far more dangerous for the charlatan to be specific.
Why is it dangerous to be specific?
Because the moment you explain in exact empirical detail how your product or your movement works, you establish a metric for failure. You are suddenly on the hook to practically demonstrate those specific results.
You've basically given the skeptics a measurable target to attack.
Exactly. By remaining vague, you force the followers to do the heavy psychological lifting for you.
Wow.
Just like the animals projecting meaning onto the owl's hoots, human beings will project their own specific unfulfilled desires onto your cloudy concepts.
So they fill in the blanks themselves?
Exactly. If a modern guru promises ultimate alignment, one follower might interpret that as finding a spouse. Another might interpret it as curing their chronic anxiety. And a third might interpret it as making $1 million.
That is so true.
The guru doesn't have to deliver any of those specific things. The vagueness allows each follower to see exactly what they desperately want to see.
It's like a psychological Rorschach test.
Yeah, it really is.
And this ties directly into the second half of that first step, right? The appeal must be incredibly simple.
Yes. This is where the charlatan exploits our absolute exhaustion with reality.
Exhaustion, yeah.
The truth is that most of human suffering, whether it's economic hardship, chronic health issues, or societal decay, it has incredibly complex, deeply intertwined causes.
Oh, for sure.
We're dealing with historical traumas, macroeconomic shifts, deep-rooted psychological neuroses, and systemic failures that are exceedingly hard to unravel.
Right. Real life is a tangled, exhausting mess. It's not a quick fix.
It is a mess, and the average person simply lacks the patience, the time, and the emotional energy to confront that reality.
Can you blame them?
Not at all.
Yeah.
No one wants to sit in a folding chair in a bleak community center and hear that fixing their neighborhood might require a decade of nuanced policy changes, increased taxes, and complex social work.
That sounds terrible, honestly.
Right. They want a primitive, simple panacea. They want a single sword that just cuts the Gordian knot.
Yeah.
The charlatan recognizes this fatigue and offers a single, simple pill, literal or metaphorical, that just cures everything instantly.
But here's the problem with that strategy as I see it. You've hooked them with a vague promise of a simple solution. Right. They're standing in the room with you. But human beings are inherently restless.
Very true.
If you just stand there repeating your vague promises, you face two massive dangers: boredom and skepticism.
Yes, you do.
If they get bored, their attention drifts and they just leave. If their rational brain starts to boot back up and they get skeptical, well, the mist blows away and they see you're a fraud holding an empty bag.
Exactly.
So how does the charlatan prevent the brain from turning back on?
That is the pivotal transition in the playbook. To prevent rational thought from returning, you cannot engage the intellect at all. You have to bypass it entirely by overwhelming the physical senses.
Overwhelming the senses.
Yes, this is step 2. Emphasize the visual and the sensual over the intellectual.
And the historical example the text provides for this is frankly one of the most staggering things I've ever read.
It is quite something.
It takes us to London in the 1780s to a Scottish quack doctor named James Graham.
James Graham, yes.
He opened an establishment that he called the Temple of Health.
It was an absolute masterpiece of sensory manipulation.
I literally cannot emphasize enough the sheer scale of the bizarre details of this place.
Go for it, paint the picture.
Okay, so guests would pay an exorbitant entry fee just to get into the lobby. And when they walked in, they were met with the largest air pump in the world, which Graham claimed was to assist in his, quote, philosophical investigations.
Of course.
He had a stupendous metallic conductor sitting on a massive gilded pedestal.
Right.
The walls were lined with transparent glasses of all colors, and there were artificial electric lights glowing in bright arcs, with star rays darting forth across the ceiling.
He fundamentally understood theater. He wasn't building a clinic. He was staging a high-budget production designed to dazzle, distract, and entirely disorient the wealthy elites of London.
And the lobby was just the warm-up.
Oh, it gets better.
Every evening, the place was packed with aristocrats paying immense sums to try his ultimate invention, the Grand Celestial Bed.
The Grand Celestial Bed.
Which he claimed would cure any disease and guarantee perfectly healthy heirs. Listen to the specific sensory details the text provides here. The bed was 12 feet long.
12 feet.
12 feet. And it rested on 6 solid, transparent glass pillars.
Wow.
The bedclothes were made of the richest purple and sky blue silk. The mattress was physically saturated with Arabian perfumed waters.
Incredible.
Beneath the floorboards, there were hidden glass tubes pumping in the rich scents of strengthening herbs and heavy oriental incense.
So the smells are everywhere.
Everywhere. And the entire time you were in this room, your ears are flooded with the melodious, vibrating notes of a glass harmonica, soft flutes, and a massive pipe organ.
It sounds totally absurd to a modern ear, doesn't it?
It sounds like a circus.
We hear 12-foot perfumed bed,
Yeah.
and we think of a cheap carnival trick. But we have to rigorously analyze why this worked so effectively on the most educated, wealthy people of the 18th century.
Right. Why did they buy it?
Graham wasn't just throwing random objects into a room. He cleverly tied his sensory theater to the absolute cutting-edge science of his era.
Science, okay.
He had recently visited Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
and actually met Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah.
He became obsessed with Franklin's experiments in electricity.
Right, the electricity. We have to put ourselves in the mindset of the 1780s.
Exactly.
To them, electricity wasn't just, flipping a switch to turn on a lamp.
Yeah.
It was this invisible, crackling, totally mysterious force that could arc through the air.
Like magic.
It must have seemed like harnessing the literal power of the gods.
Precisely. If we extract the underlying principle here, the most effective charlatans always mix a form of mysticism or sensory awe with a valid, newly emerging technological trend.
That is so key.
They take something the public knows is real but doesn't fully understand, like electricity in the 1780s.
Or magnetism in the 1800s.
Right. Or perhaps artificial intelligence, quantum computing, or blockchain today. And they blend it with ancient, mystical promises of health or wealth. It acts as an intellectual short circuit.
Walk me through the mechanics of that short circuit. Like, why does the brain just give up?
Think of it as a denial of service attack on your prefrontal cortex.
Okay, a DDoS attack on the brain.
Exactly. The human brain has a limited cognitive bandwidth. It can only process a certain amount of novel stimuli at once.
That makes sense.
When a wealthy Londoner walked into the Temple of Health, their olfactory system was overwhelmed by heavy Arabian
Right,
incenses.
a smell.
Their auditory system was vibrating from the glass harmonica and the deep bass of the organ.
The sounds.
Their visual system was captivated by the sparking electrical arcs and the bright purple silks. Their sensory processing centers are just redlining. They're operating at 100% capacity just to take in the environment.
Wow. So there's literally no processing power left over to engage the critical faculty.
Exactly. The brain physically does not have the bandwidth remaining to step back, analyze the physics of the situation, and ask the logical question.
Which is, wait, does lying on a 12-foot bed while listening to a flute actually cure gout?
Right. The rational mind is temporarily disconnected by the sheer weight of the sensory input.
That is wild. So you've used vague words to draw them in, and you've used an overwhelming sensory environment to shut down their critical thinking?
Yep, you got 'em.
You now have a room full of highly stimulated, totally irrational followers who are just hanging on your every word.
A charlatan's dream.
But sensory overload is expensive and exhausting. You can't keep the electrical arcs firing and the organ playing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
You'd go broke.
Yeah. So how do you take this chaotic, highly stimulated mob and organize them into a lasting, stable empire?
A mob is incredibly volatile. If you just leave them in a state of high stimulation, they will eventually burn out or, worse, turn on each other.
Right.
To maintain power over time, the charlatan must introduce a rigid, comforting structure. And that leads to step 3 in the playbook.
Step 3.
Borrow the forms of organized religion.
The text makes a really interesting observation here. It points out that even in a supposedly secular age, right, even when people claim to have abandoned traditional faith in favor of science or reason, the underlying architecture of religion still resonates with immense, almost subconscious power in the human psyche.
It's ingrained in us.
We crave the structure. So the charlatan creates rituals. They organize their followers into strict hierarchies with specific titles and grades of sanctity.
And most importantly, the leader positions themselves as a prophet, a guru, or a visionary, but never as a dictator.
Never a dictator. That distinction seems vital for long-term survival, doesn't it?
It is absolutely vital. A dictator relies on explicit physical force and coercion. Do this or I will punish you.
Right.
That dynamic naturally breeds resentment and inevitably leads to rebellion. But a guru, a shaman, or a visionary leader, they rely on voluntary devotion.
They make you want to follow them.
Exactly. They hide their actual absolute power behind the mist of a higher spiritual or technological calling. They say, I am not forcing you to do anything. I am simply the vessel delivering the ultimate truth.
Wow.
It elevates their authority to something unquestionable, and it actually makes the followers feel privileged to obey.
Privileged to obey. That's a scary thought. Which leads perfectly into step 4, and this seems like the trickiest tightrope the charlatan has to walk.
Step 4 is a delicate dance.
Disguise your source of income.
Yes.
Because as the group grows and you've structured it like a church hierarchy, the followers' money naturally starts pouring in.
Oh, it floods in.
People are paying for the seminars, the elixirs, the access to the inner circle. The leader is getting incredibly wealthy, but the leader can never, ever seem greedy.
The moment the followers believe the leader is motivated by pure financial extraction, the illusion shatters entirely.
Right. The spell is broken.
So the wealth must be reframed. It must appear to be a natural, effortless manifestation of the truth of the leader's methods, rather than the result of systematically emptying the pockets of the believers.
To illustrate how beautifully this trick can be pulled off, the text tells the story of Francesco Giuseppe Borri.
Borri, what a character.
The year is 1653, and we are in Milan. Borri is a 27-year-old guy who, up until this exact point, has devoted his entire life to wine, women, gambling, and absolute debauchery.
A real upstanding citizen.
Oh, totally. He is practically destitute. And then, suddenly, he claims he's had a profound vision.
A remarkably convenient pivot for a bankrupt gambler.
Incredibly convenient. He starts walking around Milan, claiming that the Archangel Michael has personally appeared to him.
Naturally.
The Archangel, supposedly named Borri, the captain of the army of the new pope, gave him the supernatural power to see the actual state of people's souls, and just as a bonus, told him he was on the verge of discovering the Philosopher's Stone.
The Philosopher's Stone, the legendary alchemical substance that turns base metals into pure gold.
Exactly.
Notice the brilliant synthesis he is creating there, though.
What do you mean?
He is blending absolute religious authority, a direct mandate from the Archangel Michael, with the promise of immense, effortless, secular wealth via the Philosopher's Stone.
Best of both worlds.
It is a lethally potent cocktail for the half-educated masses of 17th century Milan.
And it works immediately. He starts gathering this massive following. He performs these intense one-on-one rituals where he stares deeply into a follower's eyes, claims to read the purity of their soul, and assigns them to one of 6 specific degrees in his newly invented cult hierarchy.
There's the religious structure.
You're right. But here's the kicker. To achieve the highest degrees of purity, he demands the strictest vows of poverty from his disciples.
Wait for it.
They must prove their devotion by turning over all their earthly money and property directly to him.
Of course they do.
And they do it happily. They empty their bank accounts for him because he promises that very soon he will perfect the Philosopher's Stone and they will all have as much gold as they could ever desire.
This brings up one of the most profound psychological insights in the entire text. It's the concept of the mirror of desire.
The mirror of desire. Tell me about that.
Borey realized something fundamental and, frankly, rather tragic about human nature. When he hit rock bottom, tired of his life of debauchery, he could have stood in the town square and preached a message of actual self-improvement.
Right.
He could have said, I ruined my life through gambling. The path to redemption is grueling hard work, sobriety, and decades of saving money.
But people absolutely do not want to hear that change comes from exhaustion, discipline, or boredom.
Exactly. Telling people to eat their vegetables and save 10% of their income doesn't pack a stadium.
It's too banal. It reminds them of the dreary reality they are trying to escape.
People are dying to believe in something romantic, something sudden, something otherworldly. Borey gave them angels and instant alchemical gold because that is the exact fantasy they desperately wanted to hear.
He just gave them what they wanted.
He simply held up a mirror to their deepest, laziest desires.
And while his followers are taking vows of poverty and waiting for the magical gold, Borey's lifestyle undergoes a radical transformation.
I bet it did.
He takes the money they handed over and rents a splendid palatial apartment. He furnishes it with fabulous, expensive accessories.
Nice.
He starts driving through the streets of Milan in a custom coach studded with actual jewels, pulled by 6 magnificent black horses.
Subtlety was not his strong suit.
No. Now, my immediate thought reading this is, why didn't the followers see that and instantly realize they were being scammed? I mean, he is literally driving their life savings around the city.
Because of the cognitive framework he established in Step 3. This is the brilliant deception of disguising the income.
How does it work?
When the followers who are blinded by their desire for the Philosopher's Stone see Borey in the jewel-studded coach, their brains do not process it as, he bought that with a deed to my farm.
What do they see?
Their brains process it as, look, his alchemical methods actually work. He has successfully turned lead into gold, which is why he is so rich. My turn is coming next.
Oh my God. They assume his luxurious lifestyle is empirical proof of his system, when in reality, his wealth is the money they gave him to learn the system.
Exactly.
If you are listening to this right now, I want you to think about your own social media feed. Think about the modern gurus you see constantly.
They're everywhere.
The ones flashing rented Lamborghinis, walking out of private jets, touring massive mansions, all while claiming their secret e-commerce system or their proprietary crypto trading algorithm made them multimillionaires.
Yeah.
And they are benevolently willing to share that exact system with you for just a $997 masterclass fee.
It is the exact same mechanical dynamic separated by 400 years.
It's insane.
The wealth they are aggressively flaunting isn't the result of their secret genius business system. The wealth comes directly from selling the idea of the system to the followers.
The luxury cars and the watches are just marketing overhead.
Exactly. It is the modern digital equivalent of Borey's jewel-studded coach pulled by 6 black horses.
It's Law 27 playing out on our screens every single day.
Every day.
So the structure is in place, the religious hierarchy is set, the followers are fully bought in, and the leader is incredibly rich.
Things are going great for the charlatan.
But the text warns that as the group grows massive and time passes, a new, insidious threat emerges. Inertia.
Ah, yes. Inertia.
Human beings habituate to everything. Even a jewel-studded coach gets boring if you look at it every day.
It does.
How does a charlatan keep the followers' emotional temperature at an absolute boiling point for years on end?
This is where the charlatan must pivot from passive manipulation to active, aggressive psychological warfare. This brings us to step 5.
Step 5.
Set up an us versus them dynamic.
To keep the followers united in their adrenaline pumping, you have to invent a devious existential enemy.
You have to.
You convince the group that there is a dark force of non-believers, an entrenched establishment, or a shadowy cabal out to destroy your noble world-changing cause.
Aye.
And conveniently, anyone who ever questions the cult or points out a flaw in the leader's logic is instantly labeled an agent of this dark force.
If you have no natural enemies, you must actively invent one.
Invent an enemy.
The text is very explicit on this point. Giving your followers a straw man to react against causes the group to tighten and cohere instantly.
It binds them together.
It provides a massive injection of purpose. They no longer just have a vague cause to believe in. They now have evil infidels to actively destroy.
Wow.
It creates a siege mentality, which completely justifies any extreme behavior the leader demands. But to truly understand why this us versus them dynamic is so viscerally powerful, we have to look closely at the physical environment the charlatan prefers.
The environment.
We have to look at the contagion of the crowd.
Yes, the text repeatedly references the concept of the mountebank. For those unfamiliar, a mountebank was historically a person who sold quack medicines by standing on a high wooden platform, shouting down to a swarming, dense crowd in a public square.
The physical staging is highly intentional.
How so?
The elevation of the platform creates immediate visual and psychological authority. But the real dangerous magic happens down in the density of the crowd itself.
In the crowd.
Okay.
Think about it this way. If you approach a rational person walking alone on the street and pitch them a magical elixir that cures all diseases, they will likely find you ridiculous and keep walking.
Sure, they'd think you're crazy.
They have the physical space and the mental quiet to reason. But put that exact same person shoulder to shoulder in a tightly packed crowd, and their fundamental neurology shifts.
What is actually happening in the brain when that happens?
It's a phenomenon related to herd behavior and emotional contagion. When humans are packed tightly together, mirroring neurons fire rapidly.
Mirroring neurons.
If the person pressed against your left shoulder gasps in awe, and the person pressed against your right shoulder starts weeping, your brain receives intense biological signals that something profound is happening.
Even if you don't logically see it yourself. Exactly. Passion, fear, and enthusiasm sweep through a physical crowd like a literal viral contagion. The physical proximity, the heat, the smell, the noise of other bodies. It destroys the psychological distance required for cool, rational thought.
The individual ego just dissolves into the collective emotion of the mob.
Exactly.
And no one understood the weaponization of the crowd better than Franz Mesmer in the late 1700s.
Oh, Mesmer. A masterclass in this.
Mesmer was a doctor who promoted the theory of animal magnetism. It was this idea that there is an invisible magnetic fluid flowing through all living bodies, and that he could manipulate this fluid to cure any disease.
Again, we see the classic blend, right? Taking the emerging legitimate science of magnetism and blending it with mystical, miraculous healing.
Exactly. Now, what's fascinating is Mesmer's early career. He originally tried to prove his theories in Vienna, dealing one-on-one with sober-minded medical individuals and individual patients in brightly lit rooms.
And how did that go?
He failed miserably. The medical establishment examined his patients, found absolutely no empirical evidence of any real cures, and essentially laughed him out of the city.
Shocking.
Right. So what did he do? He moved to Paris and completely changed his strategy. He realized the one-on-one rational environment was his enemy. He stopped doing individual medical examinations and focused exclusively on staging massive group theater.
He had the crucial realization that the environment itself and the presence of the crowd was the actual mechanism of the cure.
The descriptions of his Paris apartment sessions are staggering.
Walk us through it.
He takes a large, opulent room and completely blacks out the windows, shutting out the rational light of day.
Removing reality.
He puts up stained glass to create a somber religious feeling. He has vents pumping in the heavy scents of orange blossoms and exotic incense. In the corner, there is a woman singing ethereal lullabies to the accompaniment of a harp.
He is flawlessly executing step 2. Absolute sensory overload.
Totally. And the centerpiece of the room is this large, circular oak tub filled with what he called magnetized water.
Magnetized water.
There are iron rods sticking out of the tub in all directions. The patients, who were mostly wealthy, highly stressed Parisian aristocrats. They sit in a tight circle around this tub.
Right.
They place the cold iron rods on whatever body part hurts, whether it's their stomach or their head. And then Mesmer's assistants instruct them to sit as close together as physically possible.
Getting the herd together.
They must hold hands, their knees must touch, and sometimes they're even bound together by ropes to ensure the magnetic force passes unbroken between them.
Analyze the physical staging there. He is intentionally erasing the physical boundaries between individuals.
Or the actual ropes.
Yes. He is physically binding them together to guarantee that any emotional reaction from one person will instantly ripple through the entire interconnected organism of the crowd.
Then the assistant magnetizers enter the room, and the text makes a point of noting that these assistants were exclusively handsome, strapping young men.
Of course they were.
They carry vessels of magnetized water, and they begin sprinkling it on the patients, aggressively massaging it into their skin, pressing on their abdomens and shoulders.
Sensory overload.
After a few minutes of the incense, the harp music, the darkness, and this intense physical contact, the entire room predictably descends into absolute group delirium.
It's unavoidable.
Women are sobbing uncontrollably, men are shrieking, people are tearing their hair out, laughing hysterically, convulsing on the floor.
Wow.
And right at the absolute height of this chaotic hysteria, Mesmer himself slowly enters the room.
The grand entrance.
He is wearing a flowing silk robe embroidered with gold, and he carries a white magnetic wand. He doesn't shout. He calmly, silently walks around the room, gently stroking the convulsing patients with his wand until the hysteria subsides and they fall into an exhausted, peaceful stupor.
It is a breathtaking manipulation of human biology.
Yeah.
But this raises a vital question, I think.
Which is?
Why does the group react with such violent hysteria?
Yeah, why the screaming and convulsing?
The French authorities, actually including Benjamin Franklin again, they investigated Mesmer's practices later on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they conducted blind tests and concluded that animal magnetism didn't exist at all. The reactions were entirely due to group hysteria and autosuggestion.
Just the placebo effect on steroids.
Exactly. But the source text digs much deeper into the psychological underpinnings of why autosuggestion takes that specific violent form.
Right, because they aren't just sitting there quietly believing they're cured, they're convulsing and shrieking.
The author asserts that in a highly charged, tightly packed, sensory-deprived group setting, the thin veneer of civilized behavior just cracks.
It breaks down.
An ancient, almost pagan longing for social unity and tribal release is awakened. Furthermore, there's a massive bubbling up of repressed sexuality, which Mesmer and his handsome assistants were clearly exploiting with the darkness, the heavy perfumes, and the aggressive physical massages.
It's an induced physiological panic disguised as medical treatment.
Precisely. And the tragic, brilliant irony of the charlatan's trap is a psychological concept called the misattribution of arousal.
Misattribution of arousal.
The followers are experiencing intense adrenaline, cortisol spikes, sexual arousal, and the cathartic release of screaming in a dark room.
Real physical sensation.
Very real.
Yeah.
But they don't attribute those feelings to the incense, the crowd, or their own repressed stress. They mistakenly attribute all of those highly charged, infectious group emotions to the mystical divine power of the leader.
They think it's the wand.
Exactly. They think Mesmer's white wand is magically causing the feeling, when in reality the crowd is doing it entirely to themselves.
It's a closed, perfectly sealed feedback loop of delusion. The leader sets the stage, the crowd whips itself into a frenzy, and then the crowd hands the credit for the frenzy back to the leader.
A perfect loop.
And speaking of feedback loops, there is a piece of folklore in the text that perfectly captures how this mass hysteria can spiral so far out of control that it engulfs literally everyone.
Oh, the Reb Fievel story.
Yes, it's the Jewish fable of Reb Fievel.
It is a fantastic, almost comical illustration of the terrifying power of a manufactured rumor.
It really is. So Reb Fievel is sitting in his house trying to study his Talmud, but there is a group of children playing really loudly outside his window, ruining his concentration.
Kids being kids.
To get rid of them, he invents a spectacular lie. He leans at the window and shouts, "Children, run quickly down to the synagogue. There's a sea monster there. It has 5 feet, 3 eyes, and a green goat's beard."
Incredibly specific.
And totally absurd. So the kids, eyes wide, run off toward the synagogue. Reb Fievel smiles, goes back to his reading, feeling pretty smug about his clever little trick.
He has successfully deployed step one. He created the vague, spectacular claim.
But his peace doesn't last long. A few minutes later, he sees a group of adults sprinting past his window.
Oh.
He leans out and asks where they are rushing to in such a panic. They yell back, "Haven't you heard? There's a giant green five-legged sea monster at the synagogue."
The rumor spreads.
Reb Fievel chuckles to himself, absolutely amazed at how quickly his little trick has spread through the village gossips. But then, a few minutes after that, a massive, deafening crowd of men, women, and children stampedes past his house, kicking up dust, screaming about the monster.
A contagion of the crowd is fully taken over. Rationality is totally gone.
Exactly. The whole town is in a frenzy. He looks at the window, and here is where the psychology gets incredibly dark.
Right.
Reb Fievel notices that the town rabbi, the most educated, respected, rational man in the village, is running alongside the hysterical crowd.
Even the rabbi.
And Reb Fievel watches this and says to himself, Lord of the world, if the rabbi himself is running with them, surely there must be something happening. Where there's smoke, there must be fire.
Oh, no.
So Reb Fievel grabs his hat, runs out of his own house, and joins the mob, sprinting toward the synagogue to see the very monster he just invented 5 minutes ago.
It is the ultimate testament to the immense gravitational pull of the mob.
It's terrifying.
Even the conscious creator of the lie, the man who knows with absolute certainty that the monster is a fiction, cannot resist the psychological pressure of a unified, passionate crowd.
He believes his own lie.
The text quotes Nietzsche here, actually, noting that the founder of a religion or a cult must possess a sort of psychological infallibility regarding souls who have not yet recognized that they belong together.
Souls who haven't recognized they belong together, that's deep.
The founder must know how to gather the lost souls. But the Reb Fievel story shows the terrifying flip side of that coin. The founder can actually become magnetized by their own creation.
It is such a profound modern analogy. I instantly think of the creators of massive internet algorithms.
Oh, absolutely.
Or the founders of huge stock market bubbles, or certain crypto crazes, the people who architect the trend, the engineers who know exactly how mathematically hollow the code is at the start, or the marketer who knows the product is garbage. They eventually see millions of people hyping it up.
They see the numbers.
They see the user base exploding, they see the manic devotion on message boards, and their own ego betrays them.
They start to doubt themselves.
They think, wait, maybe I missed something. Maybe I am a genius. Maybe this is the future of finance. They buy their own hype.
The visual proof of a massive crowd running in one direction overrides their own internal empirical knowledge of the truth.
They join the sprint toward the synagogue.
It is a terrifying suspension of disbelief, driven by the deep human desire to be part of the winning tribe, even if the tribe is running straight toward a cliff.
Which leads us to a very dark precipice.
Yes, it does.
We have seen the incredible, almost unstoppable power of the magnetized crowd. We've seen how it can overwhelm common sense, how it can enrich a charlatan, and how it can even absorb its own creator.
But it can't last forever.
No.
How?
What happens when the charlatan loses control of the very monster they built? Because maintaining that level of emotional intensity indefinitely is impossible.
Completely impossible.
That brings us to the final section. The reversal. Playing with fire.
This is the inherent, fatal danger built into Law 27. The text explicitly warns that turning over your power to a group, relying on mob dynamics to sustain your authority, is a highly volatile and ultimately self-destructive strategy.
Because if that thick mist of sensory overload and vague promises finally clears,
And it always does.
if the followers suddenly realize the electrical bed didn't cure their gout, or the philosopher's stone isn't producing gold, or the doomsday prophecy didn't come true on Tuesday as predicted, you aren't just facing one angry customer asking for a refund.
No, you are not.
You are facing a violent, deeply unified mob, and the exact same contagious viral passion that made them worship you, that made them empty their bank accounts for you, will instantaneously pivot into a contagious, violent desire to tear you to pieces.
The psychological whiplash is extreme. To unpack this dynamic, the text uses a really brilliant, clarifying metaphor.
What's the metaphor?
The magnet.
Okay.
In this scenario, the charlatan acts as the unseen magnetic force drawing the scattered iron filings, the isolated followers, together. As the followers cluster tightly around the charlatan, they become magnetized to each other. The attractive force compounds, increasing the overall magnetic power of the whole structure.
It gets stronger and stronger.
It becomes an incredibly strong, dense, unified object.
Yeah.
But what happens if the original magnet is suddenly removed? Or worse, what happens if the followers realize the center object isn't a true magnet at all, but just a piece of painted wood?
Oh, wow.
The attractive force instantly vanishes, and the entire massive structure violently collapses inward on itself.
It's an implosion.
A total implosion.
So, practically speaking, how did these historical charlatans survive? How did Borey or Graham avoid being ripped apart by their own followers when the illusions inevitably faded?
It wasn't easy.
The text notes that they essentially had to live in a state of constant, exhausting paranoia. They had to employ spies within the crowd to monitor the emotional temperature and listen for whispers of doubt.
Constantly watching their backs.
They had to be master readers of the room, attuning themselves instantaneously to the slightest shift in the mob's mood. And quite literally, they had to keep their bags packed.
Always ready to run.
They had to know the exact right moment to flee town in the middle of the night, taking the gold with them just hours before the mob realized they'd been fleeced.
It sounds like a deeply exhausting, miserable existence.
Yeah.
You are riding a tiger, terrified to dismount, but knowing with absolute certainty that you cannot ride forever.
Right.
Eventually, the tiger gets hungry. This is why the text offers an alternative strategy, a reversal of the law, for those who want the power without the explosive risk.
What's the alternative?
Isolating the sucker.
Ah, right. Instead of building a massive volatile cult in a public square, you change the environment entirely. You deal with people strictly one-on-one.
Exactly. By isolating an individual, removing them from their normal milieu, cutting them off from their family, their grounded routines, and their skeptical friends, you can achieve a very similar psychological effect to the crowd contagion.
But on a micro level.
Yes. You create a microenvironment of sensory manipulation and vague promises. You make them highly prone to suggestion and intimidation, but without the catastrophic risk of a massive, unified mob turning on you all at once.
Because if it's just one person.
Exactly. If an isolated sucker eventually sees through your deception and demands their money back, it is far easier to manage, discredit, or escape one person than an entire angry village holding pitchforks.
It's a chilling alternative, honestly. But it perfectly highlights just how much of this entire playbook relies on manipulating a person's physical and social environment.
Environment is everything.
Whether that means overwhelming them by packing them into a hysterical crowd or utterly isolating them in a quiet room, it is never about the truth of the product. It is always about the control of the environment.
That's the core of Law 27.
So let's take a breath and recap the incredible, somewhat terrifying journey we've been on in this session.
It's been quite a ride.
We started by examining the deep, unfillable psychological void in human nature. How, in times of rapid societal change and scientific disruption, the half-educated among us become desperate for something, anything to believe in, to stop the vertigo of uncertainty.
Yes.
We explored how our slight knowledge creates an illusion of competence, leaving our mental firewalls wide open. We then decoded the charlatan's five-step trap, hooking the intellect with vague but transformative promises.
And then actively blinding our rational brains with overwhelming sensory theater and pseudoscientific jargon.
Right. We saw how they borrow the comforting, unquestionable hierarchies of organized religion to build a lasting structure.
All while cleverly disguising their own immense extracted wealth as empirical proof of their methods, rather than the exploitation of their followers.
And finally, we explored the terrifying weaponization of the physical crowd, creating the US versus them dynamic, whipping the mob into an infectious biological hysteria until the followers are so tightly magnetized they've lost all rational distance.
Sometimes even pulling the charlatan down into the madness with them.
If you take nothing else away from this deep dive, I want you to remember that this five-step playbook is not a dusty relic from 16th century Italy or 18th century France.
Not at all.
This exact architecture is actively running in the background of our modern world right now. It is present in how that new viral tech product is marketed to you, how fringe political movements build their rabid bases, and how intense echo chamber online communities form around financial assets.
The tactics are exactly the same.
The names of the elixirs have changed, and the 12-foot perfumed beds have been replaced by Discord servers and algorithmic feeds, but the underlying emotional manipulation is identical. By recognizing these five steps, the vague promises, the sudden sensory overload, the convenient appearance of a devious enemy, you have the power to step back from the crowd.
You can protect yourself.
You can recognize the painted wood, disconnect from the magnet, and regain your rational distance before the contagion takes hold of your brain.
And, if we leave you with one final thought to mull over today, something that stretches beyond the historical text itself and touches on our modern condition, it is this.
What's that?
Well, if human beings possess this innate, unfillable psychological void that absolutely demands a structured belief system.
Right.
And if our traditional frameworks like organized religion or pure cold science sometimes fail to provide the emotional comfort we crave, is it actually possible for us to live completely free of these cult-like dynamics?
Oh, wow.
Or are we, in our modern frantic search for absolute truth, personal identity, and tribal community, simply choosing which charlatan or which system we are most comfortable surrendering our skepticism to?
Are we all just desperately looking for an owl in the dark?
Exactly.
It's a heavy, uncomfortable question to sit with, but exploring those uncomfortable truths is exactly why we do these deep dives. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. Stay curious, stay rigorously skeptical, and please keep questioning the miracle cures that pop up in your own life. We'll catch you next time.